We might make a start of this, which I believe is our third session on Zoom. So, hello to everyone who is attending through Zoom for this session, and hello to anybody watching on YouTube. And as always, thanks for taking the time to come along to these sessions. I'm joined here by Shane, who is going to be helping in terms of questions and answers, and also Roisin, who is helping with YouTube. So, if you do have any queries during this session, please do ask away in Zoom through the Q&A or on YouTube through the live chat. You might just bear with us if there is a lot of questions. We might make a start of this, which I believe is our third session on Zoom. So hello to everyone who is attending through Zoom for this session. And so this session, we're going to be looking specifically at breakout rooms. In terms of what the session is going to cover, we'll be looking at what breakout rooms are, and then the whole process of using them within Zoom. So how you create them, manage them, finish them up, how to pre-populate a breakout room, and we'll also touch briefly on the limitations of breakout rooms and how you could use them for pedagogical purposes. So as always, I'm going to try and keep this to around 30 minutes and no more. And hopefully, we'll be able to provide you with a session that will be of some use to you, some use to your students in terms of how to use these. So, in terms of what breakout rooms are, I suppose breakout rooms are basically just private rooms within the main Zoom classroom space. So, I always find it useful when I talk about breakout rooms to kind of think in kind of face to face terms. So, if you think about a breakout room is really no more than in a face to face classroom, a space in the classroom where you might speak to a student or group of students privately, or where you might ask students to form up into groups and to work together by themselves. So, not with every other student in the room, just in small select groups. So, breakout rooms are really that, just kind of private spaces that you can use for students to work together in groups where you can discuss elements of the class privately with a student or group of students. And the advantages of these are very much the same as they would be in a face-to-face environment. So there's a number of ways that you can use them to help maybe kind of make class a little bit more collaborative or engaging, or as a useful way of getting students to do particular activities. But we'll get into kind of more detail on that a little later on. So for this demonstration section, what I'm going to do is like with the previous sessions, because we can't really show how to use Zoom while we're using Zoom for this session. If you bear with me 2 minutes, I'm just going to stop sharing my slides and I'm going to move over to a pre-prepared video clip that will cover how to set up breakout rooms inside in Zoom, how to use them, and how to finish them up. So please just bear with me 2 minutes. You can begin a session of breakout rooms in Zoom by clicking on the breakout room icon, which will be in your Zoom menu at the bottom of the Zoom window here. Now, if your screen is quite small, or if you're using up the space with like the participant section like I have over here, where you can find the breakout room icon is by clicking on this more item, and inside here you'll be able to see the option for breakout rooms, or else you can simply get rid of the participant or the chat area, and if you stretch out your Zoom window a bit, you'll see the breakout room option appearing like this. When you first click on that breakout room icon, the first thing it will ask you is how many rooms you want to create and whether you want to assign students to those rooms automatically or manually. If students are assigned automatically, that means students will be randomly distributed across however many rooms I've specified here. If I select the manual option, it means that I can add specific students to specific rooms one by one. So if you've got a big class and a lot of students in your Zoom session and you just want to get them up and running in groups quickly and easily, it's recommended that you select the automatic option. If you want very specific students to be in specific groups, you can select the manual option. And if I do select the automatic option, I can see here that when I decide the number of rooms, this will give me feedback on how many participants per room. So I got 4 participants in the session with me at the moment, for example. If I want them to just work in one group, I can select one room, and that means 4 participants per room. If I want them to work in pairs, I can select 2 rooms, and that means 2 participants per room. So I'm just going to select the manual option for the moment, and when I press this blue create breakout button, what will happen is this other pop-up will appear regardless of whether I selected manual or automatic, and from here I can edit rooms and I can distribute students. Now, one thing to note maybe at this stage is that just because this pop-up shows up, it doesn't mean that students are in the breakout room just yet. So I can assign students to specific rooms by going to the room in question and moving my mouse over to the assign button here. And when I click on this, this will give me a list of all the students, and I can identify which students I want to be in which room. If I want to, what I can do as well is I can click on the option here to rename a specific room. So I might call it Group A or Group B, for example. And I can also delete rooms if I so wish. If I want to add another room, I can do so by clicking on this Add a Room button at the bottom of this pop-up, and that will give me additional rooms. If I want to move students between the different rooms, I simply click on the Move To option here across from the student's name, and that will let me send them to a different room, or else I can exchange students from one group to the next using this exchange option. But for the moment, I'm just going to put together 2 rooms with 2 students in each room. When you're happy enough with all of that, down here in the bottom left corner, there's a number of options that determine how students go into those rooms and how they interact in those rooms. So if we click on this, we can see there's a number of options in here. Move all students into breakout rooms automatically basically means that kind of students, as soon as I press the open all room button here, they're sent into their breakout rooms. There's no, if this isn't ticked, basically they need to kind of agree to go into those rooms. So it's recommended to keep this ticked. You can allow participants to return to the main session at any time if you so want to. Otherwise, you decide when the breakout room ends and when the students come back into the main session. If you want to, you can set a timer against the breakout room. So let's say I want these 4 students to work in pairs and I want them to work together on something for, let's say, 10 minutes. I can specify that here. If that is not ticked, then it just means that students can return when I decide to end the breakout room session, or else I can give them that option to return themselves here. There's also a final option here, and basically what this means, this countdown after closing breakout room, is that when I hit the button to end all the breakout rooms and for everyone to come back to the main session, if I want to, I can give them a countdown timer. So for example, they'll get a message to say this breakout room is ending, you've 30 seconds to finish up whatever you're doing inside here. And a final option for me as well in this area is this recreate button, and that will basically allow me to automatically reassign all of the students to a set of random rooms. So if I want to basically reshuffle everything, I can change these options up here, and when I hit recreate all rooms, it'll move all the students about either randomly or manually. When I'm happy with all of that, what I can do is I can press this blue open all room button to begin the breakout room sessions. And you'll see a notification coming up in the top right corner which identifies that the students have been moved into those breakout rooms. If I want to jump into one of these breakout rooms to see how students are getting on, what I can do is I can press this join option to the left of the breakout room, and when I click that, when I select yes, it'll move me into that breakout room. So I can see that I'm inside in this breakout room with the participants in question. So I can turn on my mic, my video, I can share my screen, whatever I'd like. When I'm happy with all of that, what I can do is I can press this blue leave room button, and that will give me the option to end the meeting, to leave the meeting, or to just leave the breakout room. And this returns me to the main session. If I want to get back at the options for the breakout rooms, I just click on the breakout room icon again, and that will bring up the options which are available to me. If I want to send a message out to all students, so I want to send the same message to all the students in all the different breakout rooms, you can click on this broadcast a message to all button. And what that will do is it will allow you to type in a message which will be sent to all of the students across all of the different rooms. When you want to end the breakout room session and bring everybody back into the main session, what you can do is simply click the close all room button here. And when I click that, because I've selected it in the options earlier, students will be given 30 seconds before they're all brought back into the main Zoom session. So in addition to the use of breakout rooms there was just one other thing which I wanted to demonstrate quite briefly, and that is basically how to pre-populate a breakout room. So instead of having to set up a breakout room every single kind of manually every single time you want to use one in a class, there is an option to essentially pre-populate and kind of create a breakout room and who's going to go into the different breakout rooms before the class begins. Now, the way that you would do that is it would be recommended that initially you set up the Zoom classroom inside in Canvas as you typically would, and as Shane has covered in the previous sessions. When the class has been set up, what you can do then is if you go to telcit.zoom.us and click the sign in button, you'll be prompted to sign in using your CIT email and password. Once you log into this area, you can click into the meetings area on the left hand side. And inside here, then you can identify the particular room that you're going to be using for students. Now, if we click into the edit option for that particular meeting room, towards the base of the screen, there's a number of tick boxes, and one of these is breakout room pre-assign. If I tick that, that gives me two options: to create rooms or to import from CSV. If I click the create room button, this pop-up will appear. And what this basically lets me do is before the class begins, I can create a number of rooms by clicking on this plus item to the right of the room text. To create breakout room 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. I can delete any of these by moving my mouse over it and clicking on the bin icon to get rid of them. Within a particular room, then I can simply type into a search bar here to look for participants. So I can add students into the breakout rooms that way. The other option which is available to me on top of this is the ability to import from a CSV file, which you can edit or put together in Excel. And if I click on the option here to import from CSV, what this will do is it will bring up this pop-up, and I can download the template to use by clicking on this item up here. So where it says click to download the template, I click to download that template. I open that up in Excel, I fill it in, and then I can upload it inside in this area here, and that will automatically create the breakout rooms. So where this may be useful is if you have a, let's say, a large number of students, you want kind of them to work in groups, but the same groups over the course of a semester. What would be useful would be the ability to pre-create these breakout rooms. And if you put together the CSV, you can always import that at short notice anytime you want if you do have any difficulties with getting that pre-population element to work. So basically, once you create the room in Canvas, you can go to telcit.zoom.us, and for the meeting in question, you simply tick the box for breakout room pre-assign to set that up ahead of time. Now, it's maybe important to note that if you do have this option selected, it's not that students will be entered into the breakout rooms as soon as they enter into the Zoom session. You still need to click the breakout rooms icon and to begin the process of the breakout rooms from within Zoom. Now, some limitations maybe just to be aware of in terms of breakout rooms just before you begin using them in earnest. One major one, potentially the biggest one, is that breakout rooms are not recorded. So if you are recording your Zoom session, When you move into breakout rooms, those breakout rooms will not be recorded. Only the main Zoom session is recorded. So if you are planning to use breakout rooms, it's important to be aware that what happens within a breakout room stays in a breakout room, and that if you are recording this session, there is going to be a gap in the recording where you begin the breakout room process, and essentially within the main room, nothing at all is probably going to be happening. Another element to be aware of is that when students first enter into a breakout room, they are automatically muted. Now, this isn't a big deal. Students can unmute themselves, but it is important maybe just to let them know ahead of time so they don't land into a breakout room and are completely flummoxed. I guess one other element on that point is that when a student is in a breakout room, they do have more permissions than they would in the regular Zoom classroom. Essentially, they would have, when they're in a breakout room, the same permissions that you as a teacher would have. So they can turn on or off their mic, their video, they can share their screen if they so want, they can pull up a whiteboard. So essentially, they can work away themselves in a breakout room. If you are co-delivering a session with somebody else, it's important to note that only the host, which is yourself, the lecturer, can assign participants to breakout rooms. So only you retain the ability to create the breakout rooms and to put people, specific students, into specific groups. The other element is that you can only create up to 50 breakout rooms, and that is dependent on the number of students. So, I suppose a maximum scenario kind of to envisage would be you've 200 participants, you can only create 50 breakout rooms if you've 200 people in the Zoom session. Apart from this, however, I suppose in terms of thinking about how one could use breakout rooms within kind of a teaching environment, there's essentially a couple of different ways of doing it. But what, again, I always find useful when thinking about breakout rooms is to think about how you would do things in a face to face environment, and maybe think about how breakout rooms could fit into that. So one very obvious example in terms of using breakout rooms in a in an online class scenario would be as kind of group workspaces. The same way in a face-to-face classroom, we might say, okay, I want everybody to break up into groups of 3 or to break up into 5 groups or whatever and work together or discuss something. That essentially would be one very immediate and very kind of obvious use for breakout rooms as group workspaces. And depending on the subject which you were teaching, these could be used for group project work, they could be used for brainstorming, they could be used for discussion, so on and so forth. So if you have students working in groups in your live classes, breakout rooms are a very kind of immediate use for supporting that. Another potential use for breakout rooms would be as one to one spaces. So, what this would essentially mean is that it would involve a lecturer and a student having a private discussion in a breakout room. Essentially, you could maybe think about this as kind of similar to a student coming to your office in a face to face environment. You have a discussion with them, you maybe give them individual feedback, you maybe look at their work, you answer any questions they might have, and potentially when that student leaves the office, excuse me, another student can enter in. So that could be another way of using breakout rooms, that you create a Zoom online class, and that you could schedule students to attend the session, and you could speak to them one on one in a breakout room. Another activity, which I suppose is just a form of a group activity, but one which we found quite useful within the Zoom environment, is think, pair, share activities. So essentially, this would involve students kind of working in pairs. It doesn't have to be limited to two, however, it could be larger groups if you so wish. And basically, they would work within breakout rooms for brainstorming, for discussing elements, and like in a breakout room, when breakout rooms are finished, all the students come back to the kind of main room, so they rejoin all of their classmates, all of their peers. You could then have students presenters share their feedback or their findings with the wider class. So essentially, the process for think, pair, share activities would be to create the breakout rooms to give students, as is mentioned there, a clear and manageable activity to do. And that kind of when the breakout rooms are finished, you could go around kind of to each group and have each of the students speak to or present to the wider class about their findings, what they discussed, their conclusions, so on and so forth. And obviously, that could be done quite easily by just when the breakout rooms are finished, kind of giving a representative from each group the ability to turn on their mic or share their screen or video. And a final activity, then, in terms of using breakout rooms, could be that you could use essentially breakout rooms as kind of a space for individual feedback within a wider class. So, again, thinking about kind of a face to face environment, this would simply just be all of the students in a classroom, and that you could essentially kind of go around to an individual student's desk or to an individual student's computer to kind of take a look at what they're working on or to discuss that with them or to give them a hand with something similar to a lab, or else potentially that all of the students will be working in a classroom and you can essentially have a corner of that class where students can come up looking for a hand or where you can give them individual feedback. So essentially how this would work within Zoom is that you would have your live Zoom classroom. You would create, for example, just one breakout room, and students, let's say if they were working on something in class time, they would have the ability to raise their hand and to ask you for help. And if you wanted to kind of show them something or take a look at their work or speak to them one to one away from the rest of the class group, you could use that breakout room, put just to yourself and just the one student in there, and when you're finished with that, to return them to the main room. So that will be somewhat similar to a lab environment, maybe where students are working on their machines and they have the ability to ask for help. And you can look at just their individual machine in private, take a look at what they're working on, give them feedback, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, those are just a couple of uses of breakout rooms. But again, I would encourage anyone watching to maybe think about what you do in a face to face environment and just think about how you could replicate that using the breakout rooms function. A couple of supports just in relation to this. One immediate one is that in the Tell Help Center, we have an article on using breakout rooms in Zoom, and along with a whole host of other articles related to the use of Zoom from a technical perspective. So, if you do have any difficulties, we would encourage you to maybe check that Help Center if you can as a first port of call. Again, probably the simplest way to get at that is if you go to tel.cit.ie, there is a link to that help center for staff at the top of the page. Apart from that, if you are having any kind of difficulties specifically with Zoom, you can go to support.zoom.us and contact support by clicking on the contact support button up in the top right corner of that website. And that will put you in touch with a bot or a Zoom support agent who will hopefully be able to help walk you through the difficulty that you're having. If you're having any difficulties with Canvas or are unsure on how to do anything within the Canvas environment, just a reminder that there is 24/7 support through telephone, through email, or through chat. And that can always be accessed at any time by going into Canvas, clicking on the help icon in the left hand Canvas menu. And from there, you can select whether you want to send an email, speak to someone through telephone, or what we're recommending at the moment is using web chat. Something which Garrod identified in a previous email, because it's quite a busy time of year. There is a small bit of a delay with some of the Canvas support agents in terms of kind of getting feedback or getting back to people. But we would encourage you to maybe just bear with them, and that uh, if you can use web chat, that is one of the most immediate ways of getting feedback quickly. So at this stage, if anybody has any questions, if you could use maybe the chat area or the Q&A session to ask anything. If you anybody on YouTube, please feel free to use the live chat to ask any questions you'd have in relation to anything which was covered there. So I'm just going to shut up myself just to give people a minute or two to proceed. Okay. Well, I'm just going to take that silence as a sign that people are happy enough. As always, we will be rolling out more of these sessions over the coming kind of weeks and months. So please do keep an eye on your email if there's further sessions you'd like to attend, or if there's any more um, supports that you feel you require. Please do let us know. Other than that, all that's left to say is thanks very much, everyone, as always, for coming along, and we'll speak to you again. So take care.